Most passengers would never notice it. One moment, drinks are being served at 35,000 feet, and just a few rows away, someone suddenly stops breathing. While the cabin stays calm, a completely different operation begins behind the curtain. And in the next few minutes, every second can decide whether that passenger makes it to the ground alive. The first response. The moment something feels wrong, the atmosphere inside the aircraft changes long before most passengers ever realize it. Cabin crew are trained to recognize small things before they become serious situations. Sometimes it is not dramatic. Sometimes there is no scream, no panic, no obvious warning. Sometimes a passenger simply becomes too quiet. A tray table stays down. A drink remains untouched. A head leans too far to one side. And in a cabin full of people, one trained set of eyes notices it immediately. And in that split second, something internal shifts. Not panic, but focus. A quiet alertness that most passengers would never recognize if they were sitting right there. A crew member moves quickly, but never in a way that creates alarm. The approach is calm, controlled, and professional. A hand touches the passenger's shoulder. Their name is repeated. A second attempt follows, then a quick breathing check. Still nothing. And in that exact moment, the flight quietly becomes something very different. Because from that second on, the crew is no longer simply operating a cabin. They are managing a medical emergency inside a pressurized aircraft moving through the sky at hundreds of miles per hour. One crew member stays with the passenger, another quietly notifies the rest of the team, and another contacts the cockpit with the kind of message every pilot immediately understands. A passenger may need urgent medical attention. To the people sitting nearby, it may look like concern. To the crew, it can already feel like a race against time. Because there is one reality every passenger forgets once the doors close. At 35,000 feet, nobody can simply call for help. The people already on board are the help, and that responsibility creates pressure that cannot be explained to passengers in that moment because there is no time to explain anything at all. Two flights at the same time. What passengers rarely understand is that during a medical emergency, two completely different flights can exist inside the same aircraft. In one part of the cabin, everything appears normal. A child watches a cartoon. Someone asks for another coffee. A businessman scrolls through emails. A couple quietly sleeps against the window. And only a few rows away, someone may be fighting to stay alive. That contrast is not accidental. It is intentional. Because one of the most important parts of cabin crew training is protecting the cabin from panic. Fear can spread faster than fire in a confined space. And once it spreads, control becomes almost impossible to recover. So, while one crew member works with the patient, another keeps service moving. Curtains are closed. Voices stay low. Movements remain calm. The emergency stays hidden. And that hidden layer is not about secrecy. It is about stability. About preventing 180 people from reacting at once to something they do not fully understand. Because the last thing anyone wants at altitude is one emergency turning into two. To passengers, the flight must still feel safe, even when behind that curtain the atmosphere has completely changed. And sometimes that means people can sit less than 10 feet away from a life being saved and never realize how close they were to losing someone in the air. Because what looks like a normal galley can become something else entirely. A treatment room, a triage point, a place where every second begins to matter more than the last. And for a few minutes, an ordinary commercial aircraft can begin to feel like the smallest emergency room in the sky, where space is limited, but responsibility is not. Behind the curtain. Once the passenger is moved or enough space is created, the real work begins. And this is the part passengers are almost never meant to see. The emergency medical kit comes out. Portable oxygen is connected. Gloves are pulled on. The AED is removed from its case. And in some situations, the calm cabin outside has no idea that inside that small space, the crew may already be making life or death decisions. Sometimes the passenger starts breathing again. Sometimes they do not. And sometimes, despite everything, chest compressions begin right there on the cabin floor. And in those moments, the cabin crew are not thinking about service, schedules, or destination anymore. Their entire focus narrows into something immediate and human. Breathing, pulse, timing, pressure, repetition. Seconds become louder than noise. CPR at altitude is nothing like CPR in a hospital. The floor is narrow. The aircraft can move slightly with turbulence. The lighting is artificial. The sound of engines never stops. And every movement happens inside a metal tube that was never designed to become a medical room. But this is exactly why the training exists. Because while passengers often think cabin crew are there for comfort, the truth is something very different. Comfort is visible. Safety is invisible. And moments like this are where that invisible layer becomes everything. Because in some emergencies, the only thing standing between a passenger and the unthinkable is the crew kneeling beside them. Refusing to stop when stopping would be easier. And most people on board never know how close it came. Not even the people sitting just a few rows away. Behind the cockpit door. While the cabin crew works behind the curtain, another process quietly begins behind the cockpit door. And most passengers never realize that before an aircraft diverts, several decisions are already being prepared in silence. The captain does not immediately decide to land. That decision begins in the cabin. The purser evaluates the condition of the passenger. Any medical professional on board may be consulted. The response to oxygen is monitored. The AED may be used. And the crew determines one critical question. Can this passenger survive until destination? While that assessment is happening, the pilots are already preparing for the possibility that the answer may be no. Nearby airports are checked, runways are reviewed, weather is monitored, air traffic control is informed that a possible medical diversion may develop. Everything is prepared before the final words are ever spoken. Because when the purser finally tells the captain that the passenger needs immediate hospital care, there is no time left to start thinking. By then, the decision must already be waiting, and that is something passengers almost never feel happening, but it is always happening. Silently, precisely, under pressure. The emergency begins in the cabin, but the consequences begin everywhere else, after the doors open. For passengers, the emergency usually ends the moment the aircraft lands. The wheels touch down, phones switch back on, seatbelts unfasten, and within minutes, most people are already thinking about baggage claim, taxis, and getting home. Life moves on quickly, almost too quickly. But for the crew, the hardest part sometimes begins after the aircraft stops. Medical teams enter, reports begin, every action is documented, every minute is reviewed. What was noticed first? How long the response took? Who did what equipment was used? And whether anything could have been done differently. Because inside aviation, emergencies do not simply disappear once the passengers leave. They stay. Inside paperwork, inside reports, inside memory, and sometimes inside the people who responded. Because even after hundreds of routine flights, there are some moments a crew member never fully forgets. Not because they want to hold on to them, but because some situations leave a mark that does not fade when the door opens. And often the passengers sitting only a few feet away never even knew it happened. Most passengers only ever experience one version of a flight, but there is always another one happening just out of sight. Welcome to Cabin Confidential. Subscribe, because the most important stories in aviation are the ones you were never meant to notice. Next time,